shift. What makes it more confusing is that avoidants can be completely obsessed with someone and still behave like they don't care. But here's the truth: when avoidants are deeply into you, they don't show it like others do. They operate through tricks, patterns, and psychological defense mechanisms that give them a sense of control while keeping their hearts protected. If you've ever been left confused by someone who seems hot one minute and distant the next, this video is your clarity. These aren't just random behaviors, they're strategic, subconscious tricks avoidants use when they're actually crazy about you. Let's decode them one by one. When an avoidant is secretly obsessed with you, one of the first and most confusing tricks they use is pretending not to care while silently monitoring your every move. This contradiction creates a whirlwind of emotional confusion for you, but for them, it's a way to stay connected without risking vulnerability. They might act aloof or disinterested, give you one-word replies, delay texts, or even avoid your posts. But behind the scenes, they're watching everything, every story you post, every interaction you have with others, and every subtle shift in your tone doesn't go unnoticed. They may not hit like or comment, but they're there gathering emotional data like it's their survival instinct. This psychological trick comes from their core fear, the fear of being too exposed. By pretending they don't care, they get to protect their image and ego. They believe that showing genuine interest would hand you power over them, making them vulnerable to hurt, rejection, or abandonment. So instead, they carefully craft a mask of disinterest. But don't be fooled by their silence. It's not emptiness. It's strategy. They check if you're online, they read your messages, and they overanalyze the way you responded. If you post something cryptic or emotional, they assume it's about them. If you engage with someone else, it triggers their hidden jealousy. But instead of confronting it like someone secure would, they bury it under more distance. What's important to understand is that this isn't just a passive habit. It's control. By pretending not to care while still monitoring you, they maintain the upper hand. If they were to show that they're emotionally invested, they'd feel exposed, powerless, and open to being hurt. So they let their obsession play out in secret, while they give you just enough attention to keep you hooked, but never enough to feel secure. It's their emotional firewall. You might even start questioning your own instincts. You sense there's something deeper going on, some hidden feeling under their cold behavior. But every time you try to talk about it, they deflect or make you feel like you're imagining things. That confusion isn't an accident. It's part of the game. By staying mysterious, they keep you curious. And when you're curious, you're emotionally engaged. That engagement feeds their obsession even more. Because deep down, they do care. They care so much that the only way they can manage it is by pretending they don't. This is how they survive their love for you, by never letting you see it fully. Avoidants have a deeply rooted fear of intimacy, and one of the most paradoxical behaviors they display when they're crazy about someone is pushing that person away right at the moment things start feeling good. It can be shocking and painful to experience, especially if you felt like everything was finally falling into place. Texts were flowing, laughter was natural, and emotional closeness was building. But suddenly they shift. They become cold, distant, or even critical. This isn't because they've lost interest. Quite the opposite. It's usually because they're feeling too close, and that closeness threatens their sense of emotional safety. To an avoidant, intimacy is unfamiliar territory filled with potential pain. The closer they get, the more they fear losing their independence, their control, or being emotionally engulfed. So when emotions get intense, they unconsciously hit the brakes. They might cancel plans last minute, act indifferent, or pick a fight over something small. These distancing tactics are not random. They are protective reflexes. The emotional high of connection makes them feel vulnerable, so they push you away to re-establish emotional space. But it's not about you doing something wrong. It's about their inner panic that arises when they feel emotionally seen or understood. This push-pull dynamic can become deeply frustrating for the person on the receiving end. You feel the warmth, then suddenly face the cold. You experience connection, then suddenly feel rejection. What's really happening is the avoidant is testing how much emotional intensity they can handle before it becomes too real. By pushing you away, they reset the emotional dial back to a level they feel they can control. It's like they're saying, I want you, but not enough to lose myself. This trick is also a subconscious way to test your patience and consistency. If you stick around after they withdraw, they start to believe you're emotionally safe. If you get upset or pull away in return, it reinforces their belief that intimacy always leads to pain. This is why many avoidants repeat this cycle: closeness, panic, distance, regret, then longing again. The roller coaster isn't because they don't feel deeply, it's because they do. But those feelings are so overwhelming and terrifying that they need to retreat just to breathe. Understanding this trick doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment, but it gives you clarity. Their retreat isn't rejection. It's fear disguised as detachment. When they push you away, they're not saying, I don't love you. They're saying, I don't know how to love you without losing myself. And the more they care, the more violently they retreat. One of the most powerful psychological tricks avoidants use when they're secretly crazy about you is sending mixed signals, intentionally or not, to keep you emotionally off balance. This back and forth behavior, often referred to as the hot and cold dynamic, is not random. It's a psychological strategy that helps them maintain emotional control while still keeping you close. They might give you intense eye contact one day, flirt deeply, or open up emotionally, only to pull away, ghost, or act indifferent the next. This inconsistency makes you question what's real and what's not, but to the avoidant, it creates a power balance they feel comfortable with. Avoidants are often caught between two inner conflicts: the desire for connection and the fear of vulnerability. When they feel safe or in control, they'll allow themselves to get close, giving you just enough warmth to ignite your feelings. But as soon as they sense those feelings growing stronger, either in you or themselves, they panic. The sudden cold behavior isn't a lack of interest. It's a reaction to the emotional intensity they just created. This dance keeps them from feeling emotionally overwhelmed while still making sure you remain invested. They want you to stay close, but not so close that they lose their autonomy. This tactic of mixed signals creates an emotional addiction in the other person. You start to chase the high of their good moments, trying to decode their behavior and get back to that version of them that made you feel seen and wanted. They know this even if unconsciously. By giving you emotional breadcrumbs, they trigger your need for validation. This trick keeps you engaged, hopeful, and uncertain, exactly where they want you. Because if you're always questioning where you stand, you'll be too distracted to notice their fear of closeness. The truth is, avoidants don't feel safe in emotionally open territory. So instead of saying how they feel, they act it out in confusing ways. They might flirt in one moment, then pull back just as quickly. They'll compliment you subtly, then criticize you unexpectedly. These mixed signals are not a reflection of your worth, they're a mirror of their emotional confusion. But to you, it feels personal. It feels like rejection, manipulation, or indifference, when in reality, it's their way of protecting themselves from the vulnerability they feel when they get too attached. Understanding this dynamic gives you the power to stop taking it personally. When an avoidant sends mixed signals, they're not trying to break your heart. They're trying to manage their own. But ironically, the more they try to protect themselves through this behavior, the more they end up hurting the connection they deeply crave. When an avoidant is deeply emotionally invested but terrified of that very connection, one of the most subtle and damaging psychological tricks they use is creating conflict immediately after moments of intimacy. This may look like them starting an argument out of nowhere, picking on something minor, becoming passive-aggressive, or simply acting irritable when everything was going well. You may wonder, Why are they doing this now, after such a beautiful moment? The answer lies in their internal wiring. Intimacy feels threatening, and conflict becomes a shield to re-establish distance. Avoidants often associate closeness with danger. Whether consciously or subconsciously, they believe that opening up emotionally will lead to pain, rejection, or a loss of control. So when they share a laugh with you, have a vulnerable conversation, or feel emotionally connected, that inner alarm goes off. Instead of processing that closeness as something good and safe, they interpret it as a risk. And rather than addressing it directly, they unconsciously sabotage the connection. Conflict becomes their escape hatch. By creating emotional turbulence, they can reset the closeness and return to the safety of emotional distance. This behavior is not about disliking you or trying to hurt you. It's about managing an inner panic that tells them too much closeness is dangerous. When things go smoothly, they feel exposed. But when they create conflict, it gives them a sense of control again. The relationship becomes turbulent, but in a way that feels safer to them than true intimacy. Ironically, the more they care, the more likely they are to stir the pot. Because if they didn't care, there would be no threat to their emotional barriers. To the one on the receiving end, this can feel heartbreaking. You give your heart, you connect, and then suddenly you're pushed into a storm you didn't cause. You may feel like you're walking on eggshells, constantly trying to maintain peace and wondering how to avoid triggering them again. But the pattern repeats not because you're doing something wrong, but because the connection itself triggers their fear. Understanding this trick helps you detach from the emotional chaos they create. The argument isn't always about the actual issue. It's often about them regaining emotional space. Their inner dialogue says, if I push you away now, I won't lose myself later. The conflict is a preemptive strike to prevent a perceived emotional invasion. Sadly, it's this very behavior that keeps them from experiencing the secure love they truly crave. What they don't realize is that by fighting the intimacy, they're also fighting the very connection they desperately want to feel. When an avoidant is secretly drawn to you, one of the most underestimated yet powerful psychological tricks they use is mirroring your desires, values, or interests to gain your trust and keep you emotionally close without truly revealing themselves. This tactic is subtle, often hard to detect, and gives the impression of deep compatibility. It's their way of saying, I understand you, without having to risk vulnerability by offering up their own raw emotions. You may notice them suddenly being into the things you love, your favorite music, your worldview, or even your personal beliefs. It feels exciting, almost like you've found someone who just gets you. But often, what you're seeing is strategic emotional camouflage. Avoidants are highly perceptive when they're emotionally invested. They study you not out of manipulation, but because they're fascinated and fearful at the same time. They know that to keep your attention, they need to appear emotionally aligned. So they mirror your energy, your dreams, your tone, and even your emotional language. You talk about your love for deep conversations, and they suddenly start having them. You say you value honesty, and they echo it. This mirroring isn't fake in intention, it's just filtered through their fear of being truly seen. They want closeness, but they fear rejection even more. So instead of revealing their own complexity, they reflect yours back to you. This behavior is especially confusing because it feels so authentic. You might think, we're so alike, or they just understand me like no one else. That's because they've made a silent decision. It's safer to blend in than to show up fully. By mirroring your world, they gain your trust quickly. You open up, let your guard down, and deepen the connection. To them, this is ideal. You're emotionally involved, and they're still emotionally guarded. It's a perfect setup for someone who fears emotional exposure but desperately wants love. But over time, this lack of authenticity creates emotional friction. You may start to feel like something is missing. They might agree with you too easily or seem passionate about everything you love, but struggle to express their own views or feelings with the same clarity. That emotional gap becomes visible the more you get to know them. You realize they're connected to your identity, not necessarily showing you theirs. And that's because they fear their real self might not be enough. Understanding this trick doesn't mean labeling them as manipulative. It means seeing their emotional survival strategy for what it is. Mirroring is how they protect themselves while still reaching for connection. It's how they hide their fear behind a mask of perfect resonance. The heartbreaking truth is that avoidants often don't believe they'll be loved for who they really are, so they try to become the person they think you'll love instead. When an avoidant is emotionally obsessed with you but terrified to show it, one of their most telling psychological tricks is disappearing. Not because they've lost interest, but because they're testing whether you'll chase after them. This sudden silence or emotional withdrawal isn't accidental. It's a calculated move born from insecurity, fear, and a deep need for validation. On the surface, it might look like ghosting or a loss of connection, but beneath that silence is a burning question they're afraid to ask directly. Do I matter to you enough for you to come find me? Avoidants often feel emotionally inadequate, even if they never say it out loud. Their disappearing act is a coping mechanism to soothe that internal insecurity. They vanish to see if your actions will reassure them of their worth. If you reach out, double text, worry, or emotionally react to their absence, it gives them a twisted sense of comfort. They feel needed without having to make themselves vulnerable. It's a test disguised as distance. They want you to chase, not just for attention, but for emotional proof that they matter in your life. What makes this behavior so painful and manipulative is that it reverses the emotional roles. Suddenly, you're the one trying to decode the silence, wondering what you did wrong, feeling anxiety build with every hour that passes. But in reality, their silence has little to do with you. It's about their fear of showing need. If they were to ask you openly, "Do you miss me?" Or, "Would you still want me if I pulled away?" they'd feel too exposed. Disappearing becomes their safer alternative. It protects their ego while still giving them a chance to feel emotionally important. The danger of this trick is that it creates a cycle. You start chasing to fix the connection, thinking your love will make them stay. But the more you chase, the more control they feel and the more validated they become, without doing any of the emotional work themselves. Meanwhile, your anxiety increases and the balance of the relationship shifts. You're emotionally investing more and more while they stay in hiding, feeding on your reactions like silent affirmations. What you need to understand is that their disappearance is not an absence of feeling. It's a loud, quiet scream for emotional proof.